Hey everybody, David Costello here, founder and CEO of Jetpack Workflow and host of Growing Your Firm podcast. Today's guest is Vipul Sheth. He's the managing director of AdvanceTrack Outsourcing. Right before we hit record, we're talking about, goodness, what are we going to talk about today? And we came to this very interesting topic, which is, what are the common traits? What are the common characteristics of the firms that are most successful in terms of year-over-year growth? And we're talking about this is double-digit year-over-year growth. What are they doing that's so different than the ones that aren't experiencing that growth? So we're going to talk about that, and I'm sure much more. But first, Vipul, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, David.
Yeah, absolutely. For folks not familiar with your firm, give us a high-level overview of the work you do and who you do it for.
Okay, so thank you for that. I'm based in the UK, but I have a very large team in India operating from 3 operational centers. And we work exclusively with accountants and bookkeepers across the planet.
Very cool. Well, early on, you gave me this really great topic, which is the most successful firms, the ones growing double digits year over year. So let's just kick it off right from there. I mean, what are you seeing that is so uniquely different from the double-digit growth firms than the ones who aren't growing that quickly?
I think there's probably 2 key characteristics. One is they really care, and I don't think you can train that into people. And secondly, they really use technology to give them time to help them deliver a better level of service. So, and that's at a very broad level. We can dig into the detail, but that's kind of a really good starting point.
Yeah, well, it's such a good point. I don't know if we've ever talked about it on the podcast, this really care concept. So unpack that a little bit for me. What are the traits you see from people that really care? Is it the work ethic? Is it the ability to try new things? Is it the client obsession? What is it that makes them appear like they're really caring?
I think the pandemic really brought it home, and I'm going to talk about one firm that did it brilliantly. It's a team of 200 people. And what they did was literally every single member of staff, including non-professional staff, had a list of clients to pick up the phone to. And that's from the junior team member to the senior team member. And they all reached out collectively to their entire client base. And almost they were like triaged. If you think of a hospital, you walk in and you don't go straight and talk to the consultant, but someone's there, they see, oh, you've got a broken leg, or you've got a little cut on your finger, and they work out what's wrong. And that's kind of what happened here, that the team members from junior right the way up phoned everyone. So within a week, 10 days, every single client had been called, and they knew who needed help and who were comfortable and were going to cope better through what was a very unknown quantity. If we go back 19, 20 months, no one knew what was going to happen. But just the fact that they picked up the phone, the clients knew these guys are on my side and they're going to help me with whatever is to come. So I think that is something that was there, and the people at the top recognized it and made all their people live to those values. But these were guys who were posting that double-digit growth prior. And it was, they invested in cloud, they invested in training their people to cope with the cloud. So I think it comes naturally that if you believe in customer service, you will do all the good things that don't just help you as a business, but actually help your clients deliver a better outcome for their people.
I love it. Yeah. And when you say really care, I took it down the direction of the firm owner really cares. But I like the way you took it. I wanted to spotlight it for the audience, which is like, when you say really care, you're talking organizationally, you really care. Your team really cares. At some point, the firm owner is going to have to step away from every client interaction. And does your team have the same heart and empathy for the clients that you, the firm owner, does, right? Like that is so
Absolutely.
critical.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And that's why they have continued to post amazing growth right the way through. I went to see them only a few weeks ago, and they are still saying we need more people.
Yeah.
And this is somebody who's put on 15% additional staff from the start of the pandemic to today.
Wow. I mean, it really goes to show you, so many of these firms are built on word of mouth and referrals. And to me, you could spend your money on, call it Facebook ads or Google ads. You could also spend your money in the way of time of having your staff call up everybody and do these kind of pandemic check-ins at that time, cash flow check-ins, advisory check-ins. Do you know when they were calling up clients, was it a general check-in, or were they asking them specific questions like, what are you most worried about with your finances? How can we better serve you? Like, how structured were these calls, if you know?
They were certainly at the senior levels, they were more structured. The
Yeah.
more junior staff, they were literally just given a list saying, look, can you just let them know we're here for you, and what's your situation? How can we help? And do you need somebody more senior? But the key was no client was missed. And because no client was missed, they knew that the firm was there to support them from day one. They did not have to panic, because what we heard about the firms that were struggling was they didn't have a method by which clients could contact them en masse, because suddenly what you've got is normally a handful of clients are phoning in because that's just day-to-day life. Here you've got 90% plus of clients who are concerned about their futures, both for them, their staff, and their wider families. So I think that's the reason why, by them doing the outbound, so you've got 200 people with a list of everyone that they need to call. And they then filter that down to say, right, such and such is a manager or might be a partner, depended on, how panicked or how big an issue it was. That determined who then made the follow-up call.
Yeah. Well, one of the characteristics that we've seen, from this really care concept is that you care so much, you want to do so much. You either want to launch a bunch of new tools, you want to launch a bunch of new services. How do you harness in folks that maybe, and this is not commonly said in the accounting profession, but it certainly exists, wear their hearts on their sleeves and just want to go above and beyond nonstop for their clients to their own detriment. So how do you create, or what have you seen that's like, we want to really care, but we also don't want to destroy ourselves in the process by going too far, doing too much? Like, is that a real risk, or is like you rarely ever see that?
We work with highly profitable businesses, and that's because they recognize the value that they deliver. So even during those difficult times, they were able to monetize for those clients that were able to pay, or they deferred the bill perhaps, but they recognize that actually, if we're going to help you raise X to keep your business afloat, that has a value. So we certainly, I'm not saying anybody did it for, some firms did certain work pro bono, let's say, but a lot of them recognize that actually this is what needs to happen. But it's a lot easier coming from it that we have picked up the phone to you. We genuinely want to help you. And if you're in a difficult situation, that's a commercial decision for the owners to then make. But actually, as a business, first and foremost, we want to help you. And by having everybody playing their part, it's a lot easier to deliver that high level of service than just the senior people. And certainly what we saw was, you may have had similar schemes in your side of the pond, but there were government schemes to keep people on the payroll without them losing their jobs. And but then they didn't turn up. What happens there is you end up with more work with fewer people. Whereas these guys, what they said is, look, we're financially capable of paying everyone's salaries. Everyone has a role, and we will all come through as a consequence. And I think that's the key difference.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. So if you're going above and beyond, and you've created this culture where you do, as you say, really care, you also can't be afraid to charge for going above and beyond, adding additional services, right? And so don't be afraid to have the pricing conversation. Sometimes the people that care the most are afraid to ask for the price, right? But it's like, look, the best clients are happy to pay you that price, whatever it is. If you're helping them raise money, if you're helping them get a handle on their cash or their taxes, whatever, charge appropriately. The best clients will pay it. Believe me, the best paid. I'm sure that's what you see too.
Yes, yeah, and in truth, no one was trying to make a buck, so to speak. They were there making sure that they stayed a strong business, so they were better able to support them right the way through.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about the maybe part two as a segue. I mean, you're having all these calls with the clients. A non-trivial percentage of these calls are spinning up work or questions or something to investigate, right? So walk me through kind of the way in which firms should think about adopting cloud technology, because I just can't imagine this firm, you tell me if I'm wrong, they weren't writing down people's answers on a post-it note and sticking it on a wall and somebody looks at it. So you need that triage system. You need a place to document these requests, to organize these requests. And so what have you seen work well or not work well in firms when it comes to gaining these efficiencies through technology investments?
Yeah, so the biggest thing for them was they had every single member of staff had laptops, even pre-pandemic, fortunately. And partly because of that, the old ones were still sitting in the office. So the non-client staff suddenly had a pool of equipment they could use. But what they all, the best firms had were really good CRM systems, which then enabled them to run the actions, allocate work appropriately. So let's say that junior team member had a call with a client who was panicking. He or she could then put on the system, Alan, John, Alice, doesn't really matter. You need to phone this client because this is what they need help with.
Yeah, it is just required in 2021, 2022 and beyond to get your CRM in order. You need to have a single place where your client information lives. You give them a call. Anybody in your firm gives them a call. You can log a note. I think all these tools essentially use the @mention to bring in an additional collaborator or team member, assign them tasks, assign them follow-ups. What have you seen? So one of the biggest downfalls, and look, we see it. We're in CRM and workflow land at Jetpack Workflow every single day, and we love software, we love our tool, but there's a real human element to using these products. And so have you seen anything in these great firms that help drive the adoption or collective buy-in that this is important? We're using this to achieve these advantages. Have you found anything useful there or any stories around that?
I think you touched on it earlier about it not just being the owners showing that they care. It's bringing people into the business that have those same values. So that's the starting point, because if you have that, you recognize all these things that a business is doing is going to achieve that, and you very quickly identify those that don't share those values, and you just say, actually, are you right for this business? Because I'm sure you've worked in businesses where negative people bring down the positive ones, and actually all we want, business is tough in any, even in a very successful business. Yeah, negative people have an impact on the good guys and girls around you. And I think that's really important.
Well, so let's talk about team a little bit more. Obviously you have experience, a lot of experience with outsourced teams. And so how do you engage? Let's say you're a firm and you've thought a lot about culture, or maybe this interview's prompting you to think a lot about culture, but you need to start thinking about augmenting your talent with onshore, offshore, freelancer, gig, whatever you want to go for. But how do you ensure that that firm aligns with your culture, aligns with how you treat clients? Like, what works well and what doesn't work well when you're assessing partnerships in that level? Because I look at these things as real partnerships. I mean, these people are coming ingrained in the process. You got to treat
Yeah,
them as partnerships. So when you're thinking about team and culture, how do you bring in outside, call it quote unquote, outside vendors, outside partners to come into the fold and live out those values?
it's great you've asked that, because it's the when I'm almost triaging our new clients, it's one of the questions I ask is, how are you going to use your people better? Because for me, I by background, I'm a chartered accountant. I would never have joined the profession if it wasn't for the guy who looked after my parents' business. And I saw firsthand, working in his business, that he didn't do the legwork. He didn't do accounts. He had a group of people who did that. What he did was he picked up the phone every day, all day. That's all he did. Picked up the phone, said, "Hi guys, how are you?" Or he'd go and have a coffee with them or a cup of tea with them. Doesn't really matter. Yeah. The important bit was he recognized that that's what happens. And if you have that culture, what will people then recognize? Because the barriers are usually not the decision makers. It's the people that are then tasked with implementing outsourcing, offshoring, or some freelancers. And if they don't see the value of freeing up their time from doing the legwork, the grunt work, whatever you want to call it, if suddenly you can phone an extra 5 clients a day or a week, it doesn't really matter. I talk about this quite a lot. The value that a client attaches to something in history is very little. So if you produce a set of accounts, the truth is most entrepreneurs know they made X, give or take a few £1,000, dollars, whatever you have. Yeah, they will say, "Oh, I know I made about $50,000 or $100,000." Yeah, they don't need the accounts to tell them that's what they made. Yeah, what they want to know is, how next year will I earn that and more? Yeah, or I want to buy that house, or I want to send my kids to college. Yeah, that's what they want to know. And if you're able to pick up the phone to them and make those things happen, and your team have those same values, you will say, actually, you doing all of that work is really going to help me help these 5 clients that I couldn't help yesterday. And I think that, to me, is the reason that you go and augment your team.
Yeah. So the way I'm taking this, let me know if this is the way you're saying it, is like, so if you're going to work with an outsourced firm, you can, I mean, you didn't quite say it like this, but I'm going to add this to it, is like, you can assess the values of the owner or the person you're talking to make sure that you're culturally aligned. But one of the biggest, I'll call it, overlooked areas when you're thinking about this process is, how are you giving the context and the why to your frontline staff that are now going to be working with these outsourced partners? If they don't buy into the premise of why you're making this decision, this is a risk factor in developing a really great working relationship and hands-offs between the two. And so if you're not selling your current employees or staff on, hey, we can level you up and train you up on more client conversations, advisory calls, check-in calls, whatever you might call them, then that's potentially breeding a level of disaster or lack of trust between this outside firm and the internal team.
Absolutely. But the key thing is, and you can talk to any firm that does this. If you talk to your clients, guess what they want to talk about? Other than their kids, the thing they will talk about most is their business. And if you can help them achieve their life goals, and they've made a decision to go down this business route, there's the reason they've done it. Some of it is financial, some of it is other stuff. you are helping them deliver their dreams, and they will love you for it. I like God's honest truth. My mum has never cried over any accountant, but the day that her first accountant retired, she did exactly that. You know, both my sister and I are accountants, so I always say the only accountant other than her kids she's cried over is the guy when he retired after 15 years. You know, she'd been in business 15 years and he said, I'm retiring. So what do you mean? And she genuinely emotionally was invested in that relationship, because it helped her go from zero to where she was at that point in her life.
Man, I love it. I love it. Well, this has really been a treat to kind of navigate this conversation with you. If somebody is listening and they want to reach out, they want to learn more, they want to thank you for coming on or just hear more about your service offerings, what is the best way for our listeners to connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way of getting hold of me personally. But as a business, yeah, go to AdvanceTrack.com and there's a green button that says start here. It's a short form, and then you get access to our Zoom diaries, and either myself or one of our team will happily have a chat with you.
All right, love it. Well, if you're listening right now and you couldn't document all the notes, takeaways, tips, and tactics that we were talking about, we're going to do a full write-up at jetpackworkflow.com/blog. That's jetpackworkflow.com/blog with all the takeaways, with all the links that you just mentioned. And if you enjoyed this interview, leave a positive review. This is what helps get us the word out on the show, on the podcast, on content like today. And if you really, really loved it, if we really hit home, share it with a fellow firm owner that needed to hear something on today's interview. But Paul, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you so much, David.